The morning sun had just begun to spill its pale light over the vast plains, turning the tips of the grass into golden blades. On the ridge above the valley stood a young man, his figure silhouetted against the sky, his hair long and wild as the wind. His name was Crazy Horse, but those who knew him well called him Thaswankwitko. His eyes were distant, locked on the horizon where the land met the sky, as if he were already seeing the coming storm. War was in the air, and he could feel its presence as surely as he felt the earth beneath his feet. Crazy Horse was born for this land, and the land was born for him. He had grown up under the open skies of the Lakota Sioux, learning to ride as soon as he could walk, hunting buffalo with his father, and listening to the old stories of his people, stories of warriors who had fought with honor, protecting their way of life from the white men who came like a river that would never stop flowing. The Lakota, the Oglala, the Brule, these were his people, bound by kinship and blood to the Great Plains. And now that way of life was under threat. The U.S. government had broken another treaty, this time one of the most sacred, the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, which had promised that the Black Hills, Pahasapa, the heart of the Sioux world, would remain theirs forever. But forever had lasted only until gold was found. Now, miners flooded into the hills like ants, and the U.S. Army followed, bringing with them iron horses and cannons. The white men called it the Great Sioux War. To Crazy Horse and his people, it was a war for survival. Crazy Horse had never sought glory. He was quiet, a man of few words, but in battle, his actions spoke louder than any speech. As a child, he had experienced visions, dreams where he rode above the earth, untouchable, his body painted with a lightning bolt and hailstones. He was told by a holy man that this vision meant he was protected by the spirits, but that he should never take anything for himself, not spoils, not titles, not even a wife's admiration. His only duty was to his people. And so, he rode into battle not for fame, but for the land, for his ancestors, and for the generations yet to come. In the early years, the Lakota fought back against the tide of settlers with guerrilla tactics. Crazy Horse led small war parties, attacking supply trains, scouting the movements of soldiers, and striking quickly before disappearing into the land that was as familiar to him as his own skin. The U.S. soldiers feared him, calling him a ghost, as he seemed to appear and vanish at will. His people revered him for his courage and his unshakable resolve, but Crazy Horse did not care for the adulation. He cared only for the freedom of the Lakota. The turning point came in 1876, during the height of the war, when Crazy Horse and his fellow leaders, Sitting Bull and Gall, gathered the Sioux, along with their Cheyenne and Arapaho allies, for one of the greatest victories in Native American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The morning of June 25, 1876, was a calm one, with the river running gently beside the great Lakota village camped in the valley. Unbeknownst to them, General George Armstrong Custer, a vain and ambitious officer, was marching toward them with over 600 soldiers of the 7th Cavalry. Custer had split his forces, underestimating the size of the native encampment. His arrogance would cost him dearly. Crazy Horse, who had been scouting the area, returned to the camp with news of Custer's approach. He was calm, as always, but his voice carried a quiet intensity. "They are coming," he said simply, and the warriors readied themselves. In his vision, Crazy Horse had seen himself riding into battle untouched, and on that day, he would fulfill that prophecy. He painted his face with white hailstones and drew a lightning bolt across his cheek, just as he had seen in his dreams. His horse, sleek and fast, snorted as he mounted it, and together they rode into history. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sounds of gunfire, hooves pounding the earth, and the war cries of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Crazy Horse did not hesitate. He led charge after charge, his horse seeming to fly across the ground, his braids whipping in the wind. Bullets whizzed past him, but none struck. Custer's men, surrounded and outnumbered, panicked. Some fought to the death, while others fled, only to be cut down. By the end of the day, Custer and his men lay dead, their bodies scattered across the plains. It was a victory that would be sung about for generations, but Crazy Horse knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The Great Father in Washington would not forgive this defeat, and more soldiers would come, more iron horses, more settlers. The Lakota had won a battle, but the war was far from over. As the months passed, the U.S. Army intensified its efforts to crush the Sioux resistance. Winter came, and with it, hunger. The buffalo, which had once roamed the plains in vast herds, were nearly gone, slaughtered by the white men. The Lakota, now weary and starving, were forced to retreat deeper into the wild. Crazy Horse led his people with tireless resolve, refusing to surrender, even as others did. He believed that the land itself was sacred, and to give it up was to betray the spirits of the earth and sky. In the spring of 1877, as his people faced starvation, Crazy Horse realized that continuing to fight might mean the extinction of the Lakota. His heart was heavy, but he knew that to survive, they would need to find another way. On May 6, 1877, Crazy Horse, alongside hundreds of his followers, surrendered at Fort Robinson in Nebraska. He had done everything he could to protect his people, but the relentless advance of the white man seemed unstoppable. Yet even in defeat, Crazy Horse remained a symbol of resistance. The U.S. government tried to break him, offering him a position as a scout for the army, but he refused. He would not fight against his own people, nor would he betray the land he had fought so hard to defend. His defiance made him a target, and by late summer, tensions between him and the U.S. authorities grew. On September 5, 1877, Crazy Horse's life came to an abrupt and tragic end. Rumors swirled that he was planning to escape the reservation and lead another uprising. Whether these rumors were true or false, they led the U.S. Army to arrest him. When Crazy Horse realized what was happening, he resisted, but as he struggled, one of the soldiers bayoneted him. The blade pierced deep into his side. He fell, mortally wounded. His death was met with shock and sorrow by his people. Crazy Horse, the man who had seemed untouchable in battle, the warrior who had ridden like the wind, was gone. His body was taken to his family, and they buried him in an unmarked grave somewhere on the plains. His resting place remains a mystery to this day, known only to a few. Crazy Horse's spirit lived on, not just among the Lakota, but in the hearts of all those who fought for their land, their people, and their way of life. His vision of freedom, of riding unbroken above the earth, became a symbol of the enduring struggle of Native Americans to protect their land and culture in the face of overwhelming odds. Though he did not live to see it, Crazy Horse's name would be remembered as one of the greatest and most noble warriors in Native American history. His life was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, to the conviction that some things, like land, freedom, and honor, are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And so, as the wind continued to blow across the Great Plains, it carried with it the memory of Crazy Horse, the wind that would not break. Many years had passed since the death of Crazy Horse, and though his body was buried in a secret place, his spirit remained alive in the Black Hills. The hills, Pahasapa, were sacred, not just to the Lakota Sioux, but to all who understood the power of the earth and sky. Crazy Horse had fought for these hills, and even though his people had been driven to reservations, his legacy could not be erased. As time went on, settlers continued to encroach on the land, their towns growing larger, their railroads stretching farther. The Black Hills were transformed, but there remained an unshakable memory in the land, a whisper carried by the wind. It was as though the hills themselves cried out for recognition, not just for Crazy Horse, but for all the Native Americans who had lived, fought, and died on these plains. The year was 1939, and the world was on the brink of war. Yet, in the United States, another kind of conflict had long been waged, the conflict of memory. Who would be remembered, and who would be forgotten? For Henry Standing Bear, an Oglala Lakota chief, this question burned in his heart. The Black Hills had been taken from his people, their promises of sovereignty shattered by greed and violence. Mount Rushmore had been carved into the granite of the Sacred Hills, a monument to 4 U.S. presidents. But where, Standing Bear wondered, were the monuments to his people? Where was the recognition of the great Native American heroes who had fought for their land, their freedom? Crazy Horse was one such hero, a leader who had never signed a treaty, who had fought with unmatched courage, and who had died for the Lakota way of life. Standing Bear wanted the world to remember him, to know that the Lakota, too, had great heroes. It was not just about a statue, it was about telling the story of a people whose history had been written in blood, yet whose spirit remained unbroken. Standing Bear sought out Korczak Zolkowski, a sculptor known for his work on Mount Rushmore, but who had also earned a reputation as a man who carved with purpose. Standing Bear wrote him a simple letter: "My fellow chiefs and I would like the white man to know that the red man has great heroes, too." Those words sparked something in Zolkowski, who had been looking for a project that would give meaning to his art. When Zolkowski arrived in the Black Hills and stood on the land that had once belonged to Crazy Horse, he understood the depth of Standing Bear's vision. The mountain before him seemed to call out, as if waiting for the great warrior to be reborn in its granite form. Zolkowski imagined a colossal figure of Crazy Horse, riding his horse, arm outstretched, pointing into the distance. It would be a symbol of defiance, of the enduring presence of the Lakota in these hills. The project began on June 3, 1948, with an explosion that echoed across the Black Hills, marking the first step in what would become a monumental undertaking. The carving would be enormous, far larger than Mount Rushmore, standing at over 560 feet tall. Zolkowski had turned down federal funding, insisting that the Crazy Horse Memorial would be a gift from the people, rather than the government. It was a decision that would slow the project down, but it was a choice born of principle. Zolkowski, like Crazy Horse, believed that some things should not be compromised. As the years passed, Zolkowski toiled away on the mountain, blasting, chiseling, and shaping the rock. The work was slow and arduous, the mountain stubborn, refusing to yield easily to the artist's hands. But Zolkowski had the same kind of perseverance that had driven Crazy Horse to fight against impossible odds. He believed that the mountain itself would one day reveal the warrior's face, his strength, his eternal spirit. Korczak's dream was not just to build a statue, he envisioned a cultural center that would celebrate Native American history, a place where the stories of the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and other tribes could be told. He wanted a university to rise alongside the monument, where young Native Americans could learn about their history, their language, their heritage. The Crazy Horse Memorial was to be more than just a symbol, it was to be a living, breathing testament to a people who refused to vanish from the world. As the years stretched on, Zolkowski aged, his hair turning white like the snow that occasionally blanketed the Black Hills. He knew that he would not live to see the monument completed, but that didn't matter. He had always told his children, "It's not about Crazy Horse being finished in my lifetime. It's about Crazy Horse being finished." In 1982, after decades of work, Korczak passed away. The mountain was still only partially carved, Crazy Horse's face had yet to emerge from the stone. But Korczak's family, his wife, Ruth, and their 10 children, took up the mantle. Ruth became the heart of the project, overseeing its progress with the same determination that her husband had shown. She believed in the dream, and she knew that it was bigger than any one person. It was not until 1998, more than 50 years after the first explosion, that Crazy Horse's face was finally revealed. Thousands of people gathered to witness the unveiling, Native Americans and visitors alike. The face was massive, over 87 feet tall, and it stared out over the Black Hills with the same quiet intensity that Crazy Horse had shown in life. His eyes, carved deep into the mountain, seemed to gaze beyond the horizon, as though he were still searching for a future where his people could live freely, without fear of betrayal. But the work was far from over. The horse that Crazy Horse rode, the arm that stretched forward, and the body that carried the weight of his people's hopes were still locked within the mountain. Even now, the work continues, slowly but surely. The Crazy Horse Memorial is more than a statue, it is a story, one that is still being written. It speaks of resistance, of survival, of a people who have endured the unendurable. For the Lakota and for all Native American tribes, the memorial stands as a reminder that their history, their struggles, and their heroes will not be forgotten. It is a monument not just to a man, but to a culture that has faced overwhelming odds and continues to survive. As the sun sets behind the Black Hills, casting long shadows over the plains, the unfinished mountain seems to hum with life. The winds that whip through the valleys carry with them the voices of ancestors, warriors, and chiefs who once walked these lands. Crazy Horse's face, though frozen in stone, remains alive in the hearts of all those who look upon it. In time, the Crazy Horse Memorial will be completed, though when that day will come is uncertain. But perhaps that is the point. The story of the Native American people is not one that can be easily finished. It is ongoing, as enduring as the mountains themselves. And Crazy Horse, riding forever into the future, reminds us all that some spirits can never be broken. Just as Crazy Horse never bent his will to the invading forces, the mountain that now bears his likeness stands as a testament to the resilience and strength of Native Americans, unyielding, eternal, and proud. The wind that blew through the Black Hills when Crazy Horse was alive still carries his memory today, whispering to all who will listen that some things, like the fight for freedom and honor, are worth remembering forever.